Yakov Kedmi spoke about the Baltic countries and their policies in an extremely harsh and even rude manner. We will present the most interesting excerpts from his extensive interview. But before we begin, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. So, as stated in the interview by the former head of the Israeli intelligence service native, now a military analyst living in Moscow, Yakov Kedmi, the Baltic countries may cease to exist within the next few decades. According to Kedmi, Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania are rapidly dying out and cannot sustain themselves without external support. He noted that the best times for these countries were during the Soviet Union, when they were developing. Here are his words: "The future of the Baltic countries, especially Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, is already in their past. It is unlikely that Latvians or Estonians will remain there in 50 years. They are simply disappearing, leaving their country, draining it, scattering around the world. These two quasi-states, and Lithuania too, are incapable of independent, sovereign existence either politically or economically, only with external support." Is this what they call independence? Within the framework of the Soviet Union, they developed better. Their culture, economy, and science flourished, but now, having proclaimed independence, they have become cheap labor used against Russia. No one in the world is interested in the interests of the Latvian or Estonian people. Maybe a little bit of the Finns, due to ethnic and linguistic proximity. So I don't think these countries will survive. They will disappear, concluded Kedmi. Kedmi also reminded that in June 2022, former Latvian Minister of Internal Affairs Maris Gulbis stated that NATO and the European Union would take Kaliningrad from Russia. The restriction of transit to the Kaliningrad region is the first step by Europe and NATO to cut off Kaliningrad, the former capital of East Prussia, from Russia. Europe understands perfectly what it is doing. The Lithuanians have also realized this. I think a clear signal has been sent to the Russians: if you act up, we will take Königsberg. Here's what Kedmi said on this matter: "Other issues are being discussed in the world now. But if the former minister has nothing else to do, let him talk." I don't quite understand what signal he sent. As for the Kaliningrad region, let me remind you that it was transferred to the Soviet Union following the Second World War. And if we review the results of the Second World War, then nothing will remain of Lithuania either, since a significant part of modern Lithuanian territory became Lithuanian as a result of that war. Then we would have to reconsider Polish borders and all others. If we start juggling legal formulations, the dissolution of the Soviet Union was a completely illegal act, violating many international treaties, including the Security Treaty in Europe. There should be no Ukraine, Russian Federation, Belarus, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia at all, if we strictly follow all the documents concluded between the Soviet Union, European powers, and the USA following the Second World War. In my opinion, the post-Soviet and Eastern European elites are filled with people unable to bear responsibility for the level of decision-making that fate has thrown them into. There simply are no elites there. And this is one of the main reasons for all today's troubles, because after the dissolution of the Soviet Union, a completely different system of mutual security guarantees could have been built, in which the current state of affairs would be unthinkable. Therefore, if we start juggling formulations, we can find many confirmations that all post-Soviet countries should not exist at all. All the division of Europe after the Second World War is based on agreements reached with the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union collapsed illegally from the perspective of international agreements. The Helsinki Security Agreement did not provide for any collapse. And the formal procedure for leaving the Soviet Union was not fully observed. And everyone knows this. As for juggling facts and dates, the former minister asserts, the existence of Kaliningrad as Russian territory is the consequence of Yalta and Nuremberg, but that is the past. Biden should have addressed Putin with a statement that the collective West is now taking Kaliningrad for actions in Ukraine. I want to say, you are overreaching, you will tear your pants. Yes, it is the consequence of Potsdam, Yalta, and Nuremberg. But Lithuania itself is also a consequence of Potsdam, Yalta, and Nuremberg, concluded Kedmi. Additionally, Kedmi noted that Latvia and its neighbors should be held accountable for recognizing the Russian Federation as a sponsor of terrorism. Here are his words: "The Latvian Saeima officially declared the Russian Federation a sponsor of terrorism. There is no point in maintaining any relations with the Baltic states for Russia anymore. Why are goods still coming from the Russian Federation to the Baltics? The borders with the Balts should be closed, and diplomats should be expelled. Why should you maintain relations with those who insult you, drag you through the mud, do whatever they want, and you politely smile, shake hands, and say, the main thing is that we have relations? Why? Diplomacy is a means, not an end. Break off relations." The harshest and most appropriate response to the Baltics' Russophobia would be to grant their states a similar status from Russia. Russia should establish such a list with all the criteria for inclusion, said Kedmi. Kedmi also commented on Lithuania's decision to halt the transit of goods between the Kaliningrad region and the rest of Russia, citing EU sanctions. Here are his words: "The decision of the Lithuanian authorities is illegal. It violates the joint statement of the Russian Federation and the European Union on the transit between the Kaliningrad region and the rest of the Russian Federation and the Treaty on the State Border of the Russian Federation with the Republic of Lithuania, which was based on this statement. This document, which became a condition for Moscow's consent to the Baltic states' accession to the European Union and NATO, guarantees uninterrupted transportation between the Kaliningrad region and the rest of Russia through Lithuania. Meanwhile, the Lithuanian authorities and the European Union are shifting responsibility onto each other. Vilnius did not impose separate restrictions on sending goods to the Kaliningrad region, as stated by the Lithuanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. According to the head of the department, Gabrielius Landsbergis, the ban was adopted in accordance with EU sanctions. Firstly, these are not Lithuania's actions, these are European sanctions, which will be applied from June 17, and the sanctions are currently being implemented by the railways, which inform their clients that goods falling under the sanctions from June 17, steel and other products made from iron ore, will no longer be imported through Lithuania. This is being done in consultation with the European Commission," he said. At the same time, according to his deputy Mantas Adominas, Vilnius received some explanatory letter from Brussels, which allegedly stated that the EU sanctions against Russia apply to the Kaliningrad transit. Meanwhile, the EU, in turn, is trying to shift the blame, saying it is a sovereign decision of Lithuania. According to the European Commission representative Eric Mamer, it stated itself about the introduction. Since Lithuania has started implementing the sanctions in this way, that is how they should be interpreted, he stressed. And the head of the EU's Foreign Policy Service, Josep Borrell, even mocked by saying that the EU's attempt to blockade Kaliningrad cannot be compared to the blockade of Ukrainian Black Sea ports. The tone of the EU ambassador Markus Eder, who was invited to the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs yesterday, was no less mocking, urging Russian diplomats not to escalate the situation, emphasizing that Lithuania does not take unilateral measures but implements EU sanctions, thus practically admitting Brussels' responsibility. Meanwhile, it is about a blockade. Building materials, fertilizers, timber, and fuel. This should be understood as an attempt to strangle the Kaliningrad exclave and ultimately separate it from Russia. That is, there is an obvious threat to the national security and territorial integrity of Russia. Dear viewers and listeners, today, many Russian politicians and officials are making very stern statements, promising tough retaliatory measures. But what could they actually be? For example, Deputy Yevgeny Fedorov proposed to revoke the recognition of Lithuania's independence. Indeed, this would create a certain legal vacuum, but only for Russia. As a symbolic step from Moscow, it would be logical, but in practice, it would change nothing. Additionally, there are proposals to hit Vilnius with further sanctions. However, upon closer examination, there are not many remaining unused restrictive measures. Please write in the comments what measures you think the Russian leadership might take. If you liked this video, please don't forget to give it a like. Thank you for watching.